Okay, welcome to this PHP Basics tutorial on loops. Basically, in PHP, as with most languages, a loop is a way to repeat a block of code a number of times, sort of. There are 4 loops, 5 if you count go-to, which sort of is a loop-ish. Well, it can be used as a loop. It isn't. No, there are 4. Okay, we're going to start with the while loop. I'll just quickly say, this loops.php file, I just have it in my folder here, and I've just got it open in my browser. At the moment it does absolutely nothing, and we're just going to use it to give a few examples of loops. So, we are going to start with the while loop, which is the sort of most fundamental of the loops. Basically, a while loop is similar to an if statement. So say if you had the if statement, if, actually no, let's just define a quick variable called x, let me set that to 0, and then say if you had the if statement if x is less than 5, less than or equal to 5 actually, echo x space. And if we ran this, we'd just get 0, because x is less than 5. A while loop is very similar to this. So say if you did while, say if you ran this code now, PHP would output an infinite amount of information, because this block will, like say with the if statement, if this condition is true, this block will execute. But with a while loop, so sort of while this condition is true, this block will execute. So it executes this block, then checks this condition again, then executes this block again, and keeps doing that until a condition becomes false. So say if we just, in here, we increment x by 1 and reload the page, we get 0 to 5 output. This is because initially the first check is on x equals 0. 0 is less than 5, so this executes. X gets 1 added to it, so then you goes back up here and checks if 1 is less than 5, less than or equal to 5, which it is, and this process repeats until you get up to 5. Well, until you get up to 6, because so when x is 5, it does this check. 5 is less than or equal to 5. It echoes 5, and then adds 1, so you get 6, and then 6 is not less than or equal to 5, so then the loop stops and you get to here. So yeah, that's how a while loop works. You can obviously use it for more things. You don't always have to just have sort of an incrementing variable. You can, for example, you can loop over a directory result, or you can loop over a MySQL result, fetching all the rows. So yeah, there are loads of uses. We might come back to a slightly more an example with a bit more point to it, because this is just counting to 5 is a bit pointless. Okay, so the next one is a for loop, which is fairly similar, although a lot of people seem to find this quite confusing, so I will try and explain it as best I can. I would say the while loop is by far the easiest, just because it's so similar to an if statement. Okay, so a for loop. The syntax for this is for, and then you define something like a counter here, and then there's a condition, which I'm just going to set as x is less than or equal to 5 again, and then something to happen while this condition is not true. It's very similar to a while loop, except with the while loop we had this before the while and this inside the block, and this is the condition. So sort of while this condition is true, this is going to happen and this code is going to execute. So say if I just have in here echo x space and reload the page. Oops, oh god, I think I did an infinite loop there. I shouldn't have done. Yep, that should be x, not I. See, I usually use I. For some reason I started using X at the start of this video, so I just went with it. See, now we get 0 to 5. Okay, so that's how that works. This is usually used just for outputting something a number of times, counting up. It's sort of like a while loop, but with less lines in a way. You can obviously check any condition in here. So you could, don't know, is set. You could use it to get loop over an array result. But the next one we're going to talk about is more suited to that. So yeah, I'm not really sure how I can explain this any further. What can I say? Yeah, I mean that's basically it. Can't make it any simpler than that. I'll just go over quickly what's happening, I suppose. We're defining this x variable as 0 here, so the initial condition of x, and then while x is less than 5, we're adding 1 to it, incrementing it, and executing this block for each increment. So yeah, I don't know, just play with it. Hopefully it'll make sense. The next one we're going to talk about, move on quickly to, is a for each loop. A for each loop is completely different to the two we've talked about so far, and the one we'll talk about last. For each loop does something for each element in an array. So say if you had the array users equals array, array Bob, oh dear, me, Carl. Say if you had those three users and you wanted to output their usernames with the first letter in uppercase, you could use a for each loop to do that. So you could do for each, and then the syntax for this is completely different. The first sort of parameter is the actual array you're using, which is users, and then you use the as keyword, and then you define a variable. This variable will be set to, first it will be set to Bob, and this block will be executed with Bob as user, as the user variable. Then for the next block, for the next sort of cycle, this user variable will be set to me, and then for the final cycle it will be set to Carl. So say if I just have echo user, like so, with a space, because it'll look weird otherwise. If I just run this, we see we get the three names. You can sort of, well, I said it was going to output them in uppercase, so let's use the UC_words function on the username, and just hit reload. You see we get the usernames in uppercase now. You can also access the keys. If you remember, we had the syntax before with this array thing, so you could have like key points to that value. So say if we had well, they're already 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. So say if we had key, oh, that's how you get the key, by the way. After the as, you just have key and then this symbol and then the value. So the key will be placed in this array, in this variable for each execution cycle, and the value will be placed in this variable. So say I can output this as well, I can just do it sort of raw. I have key space like that. If I now run this, you see we get 0 Bob, 1 me, 2 Carl, and this corresponds to 0 key, 1 key, and 2 key, and the values. If you want to, for example, say if I wanted to convert each of these to uppercase and actually affect the array directly, like at the moment, say if I did user equals UC_words user, and then I printed the array users underneath. If I just hit reload, you see we get the array with lowercase, because sort of like variable scope, like we talked about before. In here, the user variable is not the actually linked to this key, this value. But you can do that. You can actually do that. You can have it. You can link it to that value by assigning this by reference using this symbol. Now, if I reload the page, you see we get them with the function applied. So if you do that, the user variable is actually sort of linked to the array element instead of just being a copy of its value. So yeah, that's useful syntax. What you can also do to accomplish the same result is you can use the array directly, like so. If I reload this now, you see we get the same thing. So you can access variables outside of the array, but assigning this by reference means you can use it directly as the value of the array key, array element. So hopefully that makes sense. Oh, I'm not sure if I actually said, basically it loops for every one of these. This block will execute. I believe I did say that. Okay, we have 4 minutes left, so I will briefly mention the do while loop. This loop has, well, I think I've only ever thought of one use for it. So yeah, basically it does. It's very similar to a while loop. Like say we had the while loop. Well, let's go back to our original code. We have x equal to 0 while x is less than or equal to 5. Echo x space increment x. So say if we had this and we just do that, we get 0 to 5. But say if this condition was initially false, like say if this was 6, we get no output. But with the do while loop, basically we still have the same while condition, but we do that, which seems kind of strange, I suppose. But that's the syntax. So say if now in here I do echo x space I and just reload the page, you see we get you see I've done I, not x again. Silly. If I reload the page now, we get 6 output. The reason for this is that this block is execute once, no matter what this condition is. So it executes the block, checks the condition. If the condition comes out as true, it goes back to the top, executes the block again. If not, it just carries on. I'll mention briefly the use I found for this. Say if you were uploading user avatars and you were giving them random names, you would want to generate a random name that is not one that already exists. So say, well, I'll just name equals random name. Obviously the random name function we haven't defined, but you'd want to do that, you'd want to keep doing that until the file didn't exist. So you do it until file exists, name returns false, because when it's returned false, that means the file doesn't exist and you can carry on. So what would happen is, well, we don't need that, it initially generate one random name. If that random name does exist, this would not be true. Wait, yeah, if that file does exist, this wouldn't work. So then it'd spell random wrong. It'd loop back to the top, do a new random name, check that file again. If it still exists, it'd go back to the top again, execute the block again, keep doing that until it gets a file that doesn't exist. So that's the only use I have found of the do while loop. I think I explained it fairly sort of alright, so hopefully it'll make sense. So yeah, that's it for the loops. Okay, so something I was going to mention, wasn't there? What was it? I don't know. Okay, if I remember, I'll re-record this video. So thanks for watching, and hopefully this was useful.